10 years ago, I was faced with a shocking request from my future in-laws: sign a prenuptial agreement. To them, it was the only way to protect their daughter's future. I agreed, unaware that this decision would be the turning point of my life. Now, with everything drastically changed, they come to me with an unexpected proposition: to cancel that very agreement. But what lies behind this sudden request? This story will take you through unbelievable twists, where trust and success are tested to their fullest extent. The story begins 10 years ago when Grace and I got married. I never imagined I would end up in such a complicated situation with her family. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs long before Richard and Victoria, Grace's parents, approached me about a prenuptial agreement. The tension had been palpable from the very beginning. I worked in technology sales when I first met Grace. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met: smart, kind, and incredibly supportive. After a year together, I made the decision to leave my job and pursue my dream of starting a tech company. We were both 29 at the time, and Grace's support never wavered, even as things grew difficult. She believed in my vision to create innovative software solutions that could revolutionize the way small businesses operated. However, Grace's parents made their opposition clear, and it became evident in the blunt conversations they had with me. Richard, a CEO of a successful real estate development company, and Victoria, an executive at her own firm, had very specific views on the future of their daughter. They believed that only those like them, wealthy, successful professionals, were worthy of becoming part of their family. From the moment I entered Grace's life, they made it clear I wasn't up to their standards, that I wasn't worthy of being her partner. They consistently belittled my entrepreneurial ambitions, dismissing them as mere pipe dreams. Victoria didn't hesitate to express her contempt. "He lives off our daughter's money," I once overheard her say during a family gathering. The words stung, but they weren't entirely untrue. Grace was supporting us with her marketing director salary while I was building my company from the ground up. By the time I turned 30, I proposed to Grace, and we planned our wedding for the following year. But everything changed unexpectedly. 3 months before the wedding, Richard and Victoria called for a meeting at their lawyer's office in downtown Portland. "Ethan," Richard said, his voice formal and cold in the mahogany-paneled conference room, "we need you to sign a prenuptial agreement. This is non-negotiable." He slid the paper across the table, while their lawyer remained silent. The terms were clear: in the event of divorce, all assets would remain separate, and I would have to repay Grace and her family any support they had provided during my startup phase. The contract even stipulated that joint accounts would be divided according to contributions. The underlying message was crystal clear: they expected me to fail. "This is the only way we can feel secure in accepting you as our son-in-law," Victoria added, her finger tapping lightly on the leather portfolio in front of her. The insult cut deep for several reasons. First, they had grossly underestimated my potential for success, despite my solid career in tech sales and detailed business plan. Second, they had never given me a fair chance from the start. From the moment Grace first brought me to their sprawling lakeside home, they made it clear I was not the right match for their daughter. The differences between our families were stark. While Richard and Victoria had built their real estate empire from inherited wealth, my family represented a different kind of success. My father, who spent 35 years coaching high school football, taught me the value of teamwork and perseverance. My mother ran a small cafe in town, instilling in me the importance of customer service and community connections. We weren't a poor family, but we certainly didn't fly to Paris for weekend shopping trips like Grace's family. Their disdain for my background was always masked by a veneer of politeness. At family gatherings, Richard often made subtle jabs about public versus private schools, while Victoria would frequently bring up Grace's former boyfriends, each from wealthy families with established companies. The message was always clear: I didn't belong in their world. "You know, Ethan," Richard would often say during holiday dinners, swirling his expensive bourbon, "real estate is a secure investment, but these tech startups, they're risky." His smile never reached his eyes. I chose to maintain my dignity in silence. Grace often became upset by how they treated me, but I convinced her it wasn't worth confronting them. What matters is us, I'd say, holding her hand under the table. We don't need their approval. So when they presented the prenuptial agreement, I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, yes, but not surprised. It was just another move in their ongoing campaign to prove that I wasn't good enough. Grace was furious when she found out, but I decided to sign the prenup. It's fine, I told her that night in our apartment, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pain cutting deep. They need their security. We know what we're building together. She signed it too without protest, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. We both understood what her parents were trying to do. They were hoping I would step aside for someone they deemed more suitable, someone within their social circle, someone with the right lineage and connections. 10 years later, everything had changed. Thanks to relentless hard work and innovation, my startup had surpassed everyone's expectations. The small software company Richard and Victoria had once belittled had now become a major player in the business automation industry. The irony was not lost on me. Now, my net worth was about 5 times theirs. That's why their visit recently took me by surprise. They came to our home in the upscale suburbs of Portland, where we were living, all smiles and friendliness, a stark contrast to their usual demeanor. After dinner, when Logan was asleep, they asked to speak with us in the living room. "Then, Grace," Richard began, his tone unexpectedly warm. "Victoria and I have been thinking. With everything going so well, we believe it's time to cancel the prenup. We've spoken to our lawyer about the process." I could sense Grace's surprised glance but kept my expression neutral. The same. Lawyers who had insisted on the prenup now seemed ready to undo it. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. "I appreciate the offer," I replied, keeping my voice calm even though I didn't feel it. "But I don't think it's necessary. After all, you said the prenup was the only way you could feel secure accepting me as your son-in-law. I wouldn't want to diminish that security." The sarcasm in my words was unmistakable, and Victoria's perfect smile faltered slightly. Richard's face reddened. "That was years ago," Victoria interjected, her voice tense. "Things are different now. You have Logan, you've built this great company. We completely trust you now." I couldn't help but notice the emphasis she put on the word "now," as if their trust depended solely on the balance in my bank account. "We don't want to discuss this further," I said firmly, watching as their practiced politeness began to crack. "Grace and I don't plan on getting divorced, so the prenup is no longer relevant." That was when the veil of pretense finally dropped. Richard stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Listen, Ethan, we were the ones who initiated the prenup, and we have the right to cancel it. You're being unreasonable." Unreasonable? I felt the years of pent-up anger surge within me as if the frustration had finally been unleashed. Unreasonable how? When you've belittled me all these years. When you've made snide remarks about my background at every family gathering. The tension in our elegant living room was thick enough to cut through with a knife. Grace sat forward, her marketing director instincts kicking in as she tried to mediate, but it was too late. The years of disdain and barely concealed contempt had reached their limit. Victoria's voice cut through again, carrying the dismissive tone I had heard all too often. "Everything we've done is to protect Grace. We supported both of you when you first started the company." "No," I interrupted, my tone resolute yet controlled. "You supported Grace, let's be clear about that. Every check you wrote, every penny you sent, it was for your daughter, not for me. You never believed in me or what I was building." Richard's face reddened further, and I could almost hear my own heart pounding in my chest. "Without your support, I wouldn't be where I am today," he said. The absurdity of his words made me laugh, though there was nothing humorous about it. "Your support? You mean the constant criticism, the reminders that I wasn't good enough, the prenup you crafted to protect Grace from my failure? The limit has been reached, and patience has run out." I stood up. "I think it's time for you all to leave. It's late, and Logan is asleep." A simple request like that seemed to trigger something in them. They turned to Grace, their faces a mixture of anger and desperation. "Grace, sweetheart, we just want you to choose," Victoria pleaded, her voice trembling. "We've tried to support you, but this has gone too far. Grace stood up, calm yet firm, her voice clear. I made my choice 10 years ago, and I've never regretted it. Ethan's right. I think you should leave. The following day, after that confrontation, Grace tried to make amends. Even though I told her it wasn't necessary, she kept reaching out to her parents, hoping to repair the relationship. But what followed only made things worse. Last night, Grace walked in holding her phone, her face pale with fury. She showed me a series of text messages from her parents. Messages that exposed their true nature. Look at this, she said, her hands slightly trembling as she scrolled through them. Were trying to convince her to divorce me, claiming that I had revealed my true character by refusing to annul the prenuptial agreement. They also insinuated that now that I had my own assets, I was suspicious of her, a ridiculous assumption rooted in their obsession with money. Grace had stopped responding to those messages. She was exhausted from being the mediator between us, especially when her parents had no intention of apologizing. What was their response? They showed up at our house unannounced. I opened the door to find them standing there, determined looks on their faces. They walked straight in, calling Grace's name as though I were just a servant, not the owner of the house. Grace came out from the office, her expression hardening as she saw them. Mom, Dad, unless you're ready to apologize and acknowledge how you've treated Ethan, I have nothing to say to you. We're here because you're becoming as disrespectful as he is, Richard growled. If he owes us, then so do you. Don't forget that. That was the final straw for Grace. Owe you what? Owe you for doing your duty as a parent, raising your children? You didn't do it. Out of love, you did it to control me, to control us. The final confrontation had begun. I stood silently in the corner of the living room, watching this family drama unfold. When Grace's voice started to crack with emotion, I stepped closer, simply standing by her side in silent support. That's when Victoria and Richard truly lost control. It's all his fault. Victoria screamed, pointing at me, her finger trembling with rage. All of this because he refused to annul the prenuptial agreement. No, I responded calmly, my voice steady. It all started when you decided I wasn't good enough for your daughter, just because I didn't come from a wealthy family. It started when you looked down on me for attending a state university while praising your friends' children from Ivy League schools. It started when you made Grace feel guilty for supporting my dreams. The painful truth cut deeper than any accusation. They stood there, their faces flushed, while I remained calm. This only made them angrier. Finally, Richard issued his threat. Grace, you have to choose, your family or him? Grace responded immediately, without hesitation. I choose my family, my husband, and my son. Now, please leave our house or I'll call the police. The look on their faces as they realized their daughter's determination was probably a shock. They never imagined their polite daughter would stand up like this. When they tried to argue, Grace pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over the emergency call button. In the end, they left. Their luxury car sped out of the driveway like children after a fight. Afterward, we blocked their phone numbers and social media accounts. Explaining to Logan why he couldn't see his grandparents anymore would be difficult, but as Grace said, he still had another set of grandparents, my parents, who loved him unconditionally. They had supported us with love, not money, all these years. The irony was not lost on me. The prenuptial agreement they forced us to sign to protect their daughter's assets had ended up being the very shield that protected me from their attempts to control us with money. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting justice, but living well and standing your ground. Grace and I found peace with our decision. We had tried for years to maintain family harmony, but sometimes the best thing you can do is close the door on toxic relationships, even if they are with family. Update on the refund. After much contemplation, I decided to repay every penny they had given us during our early startup days, not because I owed them, but because Grace and I could have made it without their help back then. The reason for the repayment was to remove any leverage they believed they could use to control us. Grace agreed immediately when I suggested the idea, not because we owed them, but because it would allow us to resolve things once and for all. But when Grace relayed the plan of sending them a check, their reaction was predictably contradictory. They said, "It's not about the money, despite using financial support as a weapon for years. Suddenly, it was all about respect. Respect, they claimed, something they believed I never showed, even though I had silently endured their contempt for years. Final reflection: the situation revealed something crucial. No amount of success or wealth can change people who do not want to change. The issue with Richard and Victoria was never really about my financial status or background. It was about control. When they had financial leverage over us, they used it. When they lost that power, they tried to reclaim it by attempting to nullify the prenuptial agreement. When that failed, they resorted to emotional manipulation. Now, Grace and I are focusing on our future. Our tech company continues to grow, but more importantly, our relationship has strengthened through this trial. We are building a family that we want Logan to grow up in. A family based on love, respect, and mutual support, not power games and financial manipulation. As for the prenuptial agreement, it remains gathering dust in the lawyer's office, not because we need it, but as a reminder of the road we've traveled, and how standing firm, even when it's difficult, can sometimes be the best decision you make. Final update: 3 weeks have passed since the confrontation in the living room. Our family life has found a new rhythm, quieter but much more peaceful. Logan occasionally asks about his grandparents, but he's adjusted well, especially now that he receives more attention from my parents, who visit more often. Grace has thrown herself into her work, focusing on leading her marketing team rather than trying to repair what's broken with her parents. I sometimes catch her looking sad, but there's also a sense of relief in her eyes, a relief now that she's finally free from the weight of unachievable expectations. As for me, I find myself focusing on what we've accomplished rather than what we've lost. My company continues to grow, but more importantly, our home has become a truly peaceful space. No more walking on eggshells, no more subtle power games, no more carefully avoiding family politics. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the best ones. We chose truth over deception, self-respect over family duty, and the future over a painful past. In the end, that's all anyone can do. This story underscores the power of resilience and standing up for what matters, even when facing challenges. If you were Sarah and David, what would you do when faced with control and family expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story could inspire and bring about positive change. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with friends and loved ones to spread the message of respect, freedom, and decisiveness. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.